My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
You just found the perfect product that helps with staying cool during hot summer runs. No more gross warm water. Stay cool with this product from Gear Handle. This hydration tube cover helps keep your water cool and easily accessible. Stay hydrated during those long summer runs or even delay from freezing in the winter. Plus, they're compatible with various brands of water bladders and come in various colors. Visit gearhandle.com and use promo code H2O today.
Coming up on the Payoff, Brandon Novak was a professional skateboarder at 14 years old. And with that came a ticket to an incredible life. That incredible life, of course, if you can relate, was totally interrupted by drugs and alcohol. And it's a story of a guy who goes from a pro skateboarder at 14 to touring with the Grateful Dead shortly after that. And it's not like he was playing an instrument in the band. He was selling drugs wherever the band went. And he goes from touring with the Grateful Dead into heroin addiction, into getting thrown a lifeline by his best friend, Bam Margera, who tries to clean him up, but fails. Ultimately, addiction would win out. And the moment that Brandon surrendered, well, you know the story. It's cliche, but he started to win. And the guy is winning today. His story is absolutely amazing. And he wants to help you. If you're having problems with drugs or alcohol, or if you have somebody in your life that's struggling with drugs or alcohol, this is the podcast for you. It's going to help you. Buckle up, and this is a real good one, all right? But first, Kevin Souza.
By the way, I hope you don't. Oh, and who's your buddy here? This guy.
Oh, there's Novak.
Novak, take a seat, pal.
I've known him since he was 13. He was a pro skater that Tony Hawk signed on Pal Peralta, and then he ruined it all by doing heroin for 8 years.
Wow.
But he wrote a book about it. It's called Dream Seller, and it's on.
Bam, this is your friend, and you were a top skateboarder.
Yeah.
You spent most of your young life skateboarding and learning the craft of skateboarding. You were a legend, I guess, right?
Yeah, from about 12 years old on a show, and we met Bam, me and Bucky Lasik.
So you ruined it.
Yeah, heroin helped me ruin it big time.
Yeah, but you often.
Hello?
Brandon.
How's it going?
What's up, man? It's Pete. How you doing?
Good, man. Yourself?
I'm doing great. It's me, and Mike is the producer. He's the only other person on here.
Okay, cool. How are you?
So we're in Texas, and I came in here to Mike's studio, and he has a lot of people working here for him, which is a shock because there were no people here working before. I said to everybody, blink twice if you're being held against your will, but nobody blinked. Nobody blinked, so I think he's all right. I think we're all right.
We're in good hands. That's good to know. I feel safe.
Man, thank you so much for taking the time, dude.
Yeah, man. Thanks for thinking of me. It's wild to have something worthy to say.
Well, you know, it's funny. We know some of the same people. I grew up in Philly, and I got sober in a rehab, and then I lived in an extended care place, which is why your story, I think, really speaks to me. Just kind of the long-term recovery. It's whatever. It's not for everybody, right? But it's what I needed. It's what worked for you. And your sponsor, I've heard you talk about him, Lex, and I have had the pleasure of being around him in just sobriety circles. You know, I remember a buddy of ours his dad passed away, and I got to sit next to Lex at the just the dinner afterwards or lunch afterwards, and he's a great dude. And, you know, it's one of those small world things. I've heard you talk about it just recently. I was like, oh, damn. And it's got to be the same guy, Westchester, drug and alcohol counselor. Pretty cool world, man.
Absolutely. It's, it's funny, these all of these synchronicities that exist. And I, for so many years, and maybe you can relate, walked around just completely ignorant to them. And then finally, like, you know, I had this awakening. I had gotten sober and had that spiritual experience, but now, which now allows me to just be like hypersensitive and aware of all of these blessings that take place, such as that. You know what I mean? Because even when Lex was attempting to help me, and he was helping me, it wasn't even that he was failing, because he was helping me unbeknownst to me. Although I wasn't in a position in life where I was staying sober, he was planting these seeds, and little did I know that one day they were just gonna like take root and grow overnight, like they just ingested a pound of crystal meth. And he was just doing what he does in his way, and making this not even program, but just sobriety look very attractive. So he was just kind of, you know, gently, you know, giving me these little pieces of something that I didn't know what it was, but it fascinated me, and it drawed me in. So one day I, like, you know, got hip to what he had been feeding me, and it all made sense because the stars aligned, and it was like at that very moment the sky parted and I just walked across the fucking water, you know?
Yeah, no. And you talk about being hypersensitive. You're in tune now. I like to think when I'm working this program, right? 12-step guy. I'm like, when I'm working it, like I'm in tune with shit that's going on around me. And
yeah,
it's incredible because you talk about it. Like, it took me, I'm similar to you, man. I went to my first meeting in 2002. I was driving down to West Philly. I'd bottomed out. I took my parents' car, put it up on a median, right? And and I called the police, and I was like, "You got to get me off this median. I'm trying to get downtown." They're like, "Bro, you're coming with us," you know? And and that was my first meeting in October of 2002, and I didn't have a year till November of 2012, and that's just how it was for me, you know?
Yeah, I can relate to that. You know, I was kind of one of those guys for so many years that they talk about being constitutionally incapable, because I just was not able to be honest with myself, let alone with anybody else, because my life was kind of just a big smoking mirrors, you know, watch the right while the left does its deal, hat trick, if you will. And then once like I started suffering the repercussions from my actions, and you know, a lot of things played a part, but I think mostly maturity. Right, like at 17, walking into my first facility, I looked at it as if I had just been sentenced to life. At 38, walking into my 13th facility, I had looked at it like I had just won the Mega Millions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My perspective of the situation just completely changed, because I got to a point in my life where I could no longer deny, justify, or minimize the severity of my alcoholism. Right, like it was very easy for me to look back after 22 years of active alcoholism and addiction, and see clear as day that all I had done for the better part of 22 years was rearrange the furniture on the Titanic, and my ship always fucking sank. And at 38, I found myself in a position where I was no longer accepting of it. Right, and at that moment, I realized, like, fuck, I've placed me here time and time again. And then the common denominator in my problems were me. You know, like everything that Lex had gently given to me, that every group facilitator, psychiatrist, therapist gently handed to me. And it didn't make sense until it made sense. And you know, towards the end, you know, in a few particular days, time span, like it all made sense. And that's when those seeds just like erupted. And I understood exactly what they had all been saying to me all along.
And dude, it's not like you scripted it, right? Because I want to get into your story, but you find yourself having that awakening at an airport right? A TSA agent pulls you out of line, I guess, and won't let you get on a flight because you're wasted. And that is the moment of clarity for you. And so it's not like, and my same thing. I was high and I was drunk at a dinner with the guy that was my temporary sponsor, and he just was like, "Look, dude, you need to go to rehab. Like, you need to because I'd never actually been to treatment." And I was like, "Fuck, man, I guess that could work." I don't know what happened, but I went. I said, "Give me a week." Went out in part, but I went. And my life changed. So your life starts. You grew up in Maryland, in the Baltimore area?
Yeah, born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland.
And addiction in your family? Like, I know just from your story, you've got brilliant people in your family. I guess your brother's a big-time attorney. Your mom was some kind of doctor or scientist.
Yeah. My mother was a nuclear physicist. My brother's an attorney who practices in the White House. And then my father died as a direct result of the disease of addiction. So my brother, and I have a sister as well who works in the hospital for my mother. My brother and my sister are both by a different man. They have no issue, nor have they ever, with drugs or alcohol. I am the only child by my father, and I was an alcoholic, and my father was an alcoholic, and his father was an alcoholic. So I believe that I was genetically predisposed to this situation.
Yeah, same as me. My dad's side of the family. I mean, it's the old joke I use, but man, alcoholism doesn't run in our family. It gallops.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of how it goes, man. So you grew up skateboarding. Was that your first drug? A skateboard?
Yeah, absolutely. It did for me what no other person, place, or thing was ever capable of doing. It allowed me to feel whole. It allowed me to feel part of. It allowed me to feel attractive, desirable. All those things that drugs and alcohol later on created that delusional narrative of. Is what it did for me.
And you became a pro skateboarder at 14. Were you good enough? You signed right at 14.
Yeah. So I was like design. I was at 14. I was the first skateboarder ever endorsed by Gatorade. At 15, I was riding for Pal Peralta. I was designing my prototype shape. I was touring the world with Kyle Peralta, Tony Hawk, the Bones Brigade.
What's that like for a young guy? I mean, you're doing Gatorade promos and commercials with Michael Jordan. You're in Chicago. What the hell is that like, dude?
It was. I can't even say it was surreal because skateboarding raised me, and I attribute skateboarding really to my life today and sobriety as well. I'm a firm believer that skateboarding weeds out the quitters. And my father was around just enough to let me know that he wasn't around. And he was a pretty unsavory kind of fellow, if you will. He never held a job a day in his life. He taught me one thing, if and when I go to prison, how to conduct myself. He ran with the Hells Angels. So he would wreak a lot of havoc when he would come home.
Were those people in your life, like the Hells Angels, like your dad's friends? Were they drifting around too?
They would. Yes, absolutely. They would come around. I remember being a kid, and my father one year, he bought me a YZ50, and he got me these chaps. So I'm like, I don't even know, maybe 6, 7 years old, and I'd be in the garage with all the Hells Angels guys, and they'd be working on their bikes, and I'd have my chaps on, and I'd be watching my little yellow YZ50, and this was so a part of. And they were all good guys. And what I didn't know then that I see clear as day now, right, because I've had that awakening and I'm in tune with reality, is that my father did the best that he could with what he had. So I don't blame him or cite him for any of this. That's not the reality of the situation.
How did that impact you, being around, going to becoming a pro skateboarder at 14? You're the first of your kind. You have access now. How did that impact you as a young man and as an early, an addict, right, in the early stages before you even drank or used drugs?
Yeah, it was really rad, man. I would go out to California and stay at Tony Hawk's house for extended periods of time, and travel the world and do these things that to me at the time were very normal, because again, like I was saying, skateboarding raised me. So in order to stay away from the house, because I never knew what kind of deal my father was going to present when he walked in the door, I would just skateboard from literally sun up till way into past sundown, and spend the least amount of time at home. So I was just so consumed with skateboarding that was the norm. So, to me, it wasn't like I was doing this crazy, elaborate, one-of-a-kind stuff, because that's all that I did. I ate it, I slept it, I dreamt it, I breathed it. And I was so young. And so now I look back and but that's life. It's all in retrospect, right? Live forward and learn backwards. And now I can look back and see how amazingly blessed I was at that age. But at that time, I was just so consumed with just wanting to skate, wanting to talk about skating, wanting to be around skaters. I just so consumed that I didn't really reap the rewards, if you will. Was there
a moment when you noticed that whatever drug, I mean, I know heroin became a big issue for you, a huge issue, right? A monster, like it does for just about anybody that gets involved in it. But was there a moment when you saw that drugs had started to erode your performance skating, like that you could put your finger on and you were like, fuck, like this thing's got me?
I could, looking back, so I'm from Baltimore, and I was raised by all the skaters in Baltimore, and one of the household names is Bucky Lasik, and he's another pro out of Baltimore, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he was the one that got me sponsored by Payoff and would take me out to Tony Hawk's house, and he was my mentor, my idol. And when I noticed the disconnection beginning to take place between me and skateboarding as a direct result of drugs and alcohol, like Bucky would always come pick me up after school and we'd go skate all day, all night. And I slowly started making excuses as to why I couldn't go. And 2 days turned into 4 turned into 8 turned into 16. And then before you know it, he stopped showing up. I stopped calling. My mother started asking questions as to why I'm not going with him. I've never even talked about that till now, actually. But those are the very beginning signs that I recognized that something was going on. But I wasn't even close to addressing it, right? It still wasn't even a thought in my mind.
Because it's exciting and it's awesome and it kicks ass. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I was huge into sports athlete, and the moment I started to drink and eventually started to use, but I mean, the moment I started to drink, all I cared about was drinking more, and honestly, like girls, because I think that was more of an ego thing. That just seemed cool, it was just like I totally lost myself in this shit, and it took me, like you said, a couple decades to actually wrap my head around how huge this whole fundamental issue was, right? Of just being an addict, like I'm the issue, right? Like, once you take drugs and alcohol away, like, I'm still pretty screwed up. I've got to look into that, and luckily we have a program that assists us in doing that, right?
That's the funny thing about it is when I'm talking about these scenarios that took place, decades ago, before I even like years before I even entered into my first treatment center at 17, years before. So I'm talking 15, 16. The disconnection from reality that had already taken place is fucking astronomical. You know what I mean? From my alcoholism and addiction. And I wasn't even at that problematic stage where people started like recognizing these red flags. But like I could see, because if you think about it, from 7 years old till 15, almost 16, when I got my first skateboard, to when I completely hung it up and walked into my first treatment center, I ate it, I breathed it, I slept it, I dreamt it. Nothing else mattered. I had became it. You know, like I had became the dream that I had always longed for. Nothing could have gotten better in my life at that time. And then when I'm forced with the ultimatum of going to treatment, saving my life, continue to skate for POW, or quit the team, I didn't even have a breath of fresh air in my lungs when I said I quit. You know, so it's just insanity to think. And that's before even entering into my first treatment center.
And we're going to you have such an incredible message, and we're going to get to the recovery portion of it, right? Like we are now, actually. We're talking and we're living it. And I can feel it coming off you. But a couple questions I have, dude. How do you go from being a pro skateboarder to ending up touring with the Dead? I mean, how does that, because we're pretty much the same age, grew up around the same area. And I remember those Dead shows, right? I mean, I never like committed, right? I never like went on tour with them actually, but I remember when they would come through like DC, Philly. What was that like? How did that happen for you? How did that progression take place?
Well, I got wrapped up with some fellas that were selling a lot of herb. They were having a lot of herbs shipped in. And this is like obviously back in 95, so way before it is what it's like today. And herbs kind of like it's as prevalent as a cigarette.
No, it was off limits back then, dude. You could get you get in trouble, you know, if you got caught.
Yeah, totally. And I connected with some guys that were having like hundreds of pounds literally shipped in. And they were making a lot of money, and I connected with them, and this is when skateboarding was it was exiting the scene, and now just partying and just doing whatever without responsibility or care was taking precedence in my life. And so their connect that would ship the herb in was a guy from San Francisco who was would follow the Dead and was like a big, fan of that whole world. And so I kind of like got into it via the money that could be made from it, the drug revenue and, whatnot, the company, the drugs. So I got into it from a financial perspective with drugs that I could get from certain guys that would follow the tour. And in doing that, then it just required me to travel to different states to meet these guys. And then I would just do what they were doing.
It's a job requirement.
What's that?
It was a job requirement.
Yeah, it literally was. And then it became like, but then keep in mind too, I'm still technically sponsored by Power Peralta, so I'm still getting boxes of boards and product and all that. So then I would go to these Dead shows, and I'd have like 10, 15 brand new boards, and I would just trade these boards for like really good kind buds, prescription pills, any good drugs I could find. I would just trade, and they would love that because no one really ever had skateboards and stuff like that then.
We'll get back to this conversation in a second, but right now, a word from our sponsors.
The all-new Chevy Colorado is made for more. Stacked with the latest in-vehicle technologies like a class-leading 11-inch diagonal center touchscreen and an extra-large wireless charging pad. Plus, it features wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility to make staying connected easy wherever your adventure takes you. Chevy Colorado, made for more. Learn more at Chevrolet.com/truck/Colorado. Claims based on latest competitive data.
And then you start to sell acid as a part of this, and you start to sell huge quantities. You're making a lot. You're making a lot of money. How much acid were you selling?
Well, we had a connect that would fly in again from San Francisco, and he would
different guy or same guy?
No, a different guy.
All right.
Different guy. But yeah, San Francisco was just kind of, that was the hate Ashbury. Yeah. It was like it was like Jerusalem for deadheads if you're a holy goer. And this guy he would fly into Baltimore and bring these raw crystal grams in, and he would lay the raw crystal gram, and you get like anywhere from 30 to 50 books from the crystal gram, and a book is 10 sheets. 10 sheets is 1,000 hits. So when it broke down, we were selling I was selling the books for like anywhere from between $300 to $500, and so you're getting 1,000 hits for $300 to $500.
Wow.
And they're lining up around the block. So money was coming in hand over fist at that point in time, and that was kind of when.
How much for people that don't know, which is probably for almost everybody? How much do 1,000 hits go for?
Well,
if you can ballpark it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been so disconnected from that world for a long time. I don't know what they go for today. Back then, I think they would go for a few bucks a hit, maybe $2, $3, $4, $5 a hit.
Yeah, so you're making a shitload of money.
Yeah. So 1,000 hits. If I sold it for $1, it would be $1,000. If I sold it for $5, it would be $5,000. So if I'm selling, that's a book. So a book is again 1,000 hits. If they're going if I sold them for $5 a hit for 5,000, I'm selling them for 300. A book for 300. You can do the math.
Yeah. Well, I can't, but other people can.
Well, I'm not a math guy. It's funny. I'm not a math guy either, but I could break that down like a math genius. Or if you ask me about 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, 90, 105. My heroin dealer used to sell $15 bags of heroin, so I can do the 15 really well too.
Well, so was there a time when you're starting to just deteriorate, obviously as a skateboarder, when you bump into one of your guys who was with you on the come up skateboarding and now is having success, and were they like, dude, what are you doing? Was there anybody that grabbed you? Was there a moment?
One very, very, very embarrassing time that I'll never forget. And I'm like, I'd been through the mill. My addiction's definitely played its course, and I'm not at the tail end. Looking back, I know that I wasn't at the tail end, but at the time, I felt like it was probably going to be the tail end. Little did I know, I still had another 8 to 10 years to play. But what it looked like for me at that period in my life was I'm living in an area called Federal Hill in Baltimore City. I'm living with this gay man who is the manager of this restaurant. The way that I pay my rent to live in his house is I would allow him to shave my asshole every few days. That was his thing. And then I could just take the money that I made from waiting tables at his restaurant and just buy heroin. Just really a meager existence, to say at least at best. And one day I'm waiting tables and I look up and it's this crew of skaters come in and I could tell that they were somebody, the way they were dressed, and you're a sports guy. If you you could tell when someone walks into that stature, whether it's pro football player, baseball, basketball, whatever.
For sure.
And they sit down, and I try my best to avoid that table like the plague. And lo and behold, they insist that I take care of them. So I go over and I say, "Can I get you guys anything to drink?" And the one guy in particular looks up to me and he goes, "Novak?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "What the fuck happened to you?" And that at the moment, it was just everything in me just crumbled, and because again, my brain would create these delusional narratives that allowed me like I said earlier, it allowed me to justify or minimize my disease of alcoholism or addiction. But on very few occasions, I'd be called out, and I knew that I couldn't deny it, and that was one of those occasions.
Yeah, I mean, because it sounds like you did a really good job. You for me, I fell so deep into the abyss that there was nobody around me that could shame me anymore. Almost, there were obligations that I would have to show up to, and then I would just stop going to those. So it's funny how you insulate yourself
Oh, 100%. And yeah, it was just, and again, like I said, looking back, I thought at that time it was coming close to the end, and I had no idea that I still had, many years to play in that game. And at the end of the real end is when I started completely disconnecting from any, like you just talked about.
Yeah.
There was no one in my life, and if there was, I could give a fuck less of what their opinion was of me, because I was in it to win it at that point.
And in between these periods, Bam Margera, who's like your best friend, still is, right?
Yeah.
Who, people know they can look up what's going on with him, but he struggles with addiction. One of the Jackass guys and Viva La Bam, all that stuff. But he is one of your best friends from skating, right? When you were real young, and he reaches out to you and says, "Hey, come stay with me," right? Like, get your shit together.
Yeah.
In Westchester.
That's how that integration emerged from Baltimore to Westchester took place, or Pennsylvania for that matter.
Yeah.
I'm at this point, probably it was a few years after that incident where I was in that restaurant, and I was called out by another pro skater. A few years after, I was, things got worse, homeless, living on the streets, and I would occasionally stop into this skate shop in Baltimore and ask them for some money. But I really tried to avoid that because it was very embarrassing. But again, at this point, I started really not giving a fuck too much about people.
Yeah, we're junkies, dude. Yeah, I mean, it's like...
it's like... In the beginning, I really cared, and as time progressed, it just faded away. And so one day, times were bad, and I couldn't come up with a couple bucks. I walked into the skate shop, and I said, "Hey, can I get a couple bucks?" And they said, "No, we're not going to give you money, but Bam happened to be here yesterday doing a demo, and he asked about you. And we said that you popped your head in occasionally trying to get money, and he said, well, let Novak know if he ever wants to get clean. Here's my number. Have him call me." Again, the synchronicity, right? Like It was the day before. And I take that number, I put it in my pocket. Now, this is before cell phones are a thing. So all you have is pay phones, and the pay phones are 50 cents a call. And to me, 50 cents is like a lot at that point. Yeah. Like, it's 50, I need $9.50 more to acquire a bag of heroin.
I can do that math. That's like, what is that? Like 5% of getting what you need. Yeah.
See what I mean? You got it. You got it. And I didn't call immediately, but like 3 or 4 days later, I went to the payphone. I put the 50 cents in. I held on to the thing, because if he didn't answer, I had to hurry up and hang it up before the machine picked up and took my 50 cents. and it was a skate shop. He gave me the number to Fairman Skate Shop in Westchester, and I said, "Is Dan there?" And the owner answered. He said, "No, this is Fairman's. He was just in here, but he's actually next door at the restaurant. Do you want me to grab him?" So again, the synchronicity, things are just lining up. If he wasn't there, there was no way I would ever call back. And he just happened to pop his head in. And so they get him. I wait on the phone. Short story long. He offers me this chance to get off heroin, get out of the streets of Baltimore, and come live with him and start skating again. And that night, I was on a Greyhound bus from Baltimore to Westchester. Yeah. And that's where, he said, "Look, I could live with him." At that point, he's filming the CKY videos, and he allowed me to be in there and to live at his house and detox and skate. And I attempted to do that. And I attempted to do that for a long time. And, I'd stay, I'd make an excuse as to why I had to go back to Baltimore, or I'd get kicked out. It was a wash, rinse, repeat for a lot of years. Yeah. Until it kind of took, if you will.
But you're on the ride, along with him, and you guys are doing your thing. And it's almost, I would imagine, it's almost hard to get sober in that environment, whether your best friend wants you to or not. You guys are surrounded by, like, I remember, Novak, it's funny, dude. I'm like a huge Howard Stern guy, and I knew who you were. I knew who Bam was. But I can remember you guys being on Stern, or he was on Stern, and he was talking about you so much, and it was hilarious. And so you're providing a lot of happiness and good content for people, and you're generating money. And so it's got to be tough to get off the train at that point.
Well, that was honestly one of the hardest things about all of it, right? Not really the Howard Stern era, because like I had done some things on my own that allowed me to stand on my own for once. Like I had written the books, doing all these things. I had been on the Viva La Bam show, and I think Jackass at that point, maybe my timeline's bad, but I started to kind of do some things to where I was the product. So it allowed me a little more leadway. But before that, in the beginning era of this new chapter in my life of living in Westchester and getting off drugs, it was really the internal struggle was just, God, it was so daunting, because I had burnt every bridge in Baltimore. I'm living on the streets, and I knew it, right? There was no delusion that like I could repair this. That was no. But then now I'm allowed this opportunity to basically recreate my life in Westchester. Now I go to Westchester and I see as clear as day on this plate in front of me this amazing opportunity that I have.
Yeah.
And like I can literally take off in multiple directions and like really make something of this and become very successful internally and externally. But I know in my heart of hearts that my addiction is so powerful that it's not going to last. Like I'm going to burn these bridges too. I saw it, and I was unable to control it. You know, it's like a wildfire. You see it coming at you and you want to do everything to stop it, but you just can't.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, because, you know, talking to you, you understand the complexity and power of addiction.
The helplessness you feel in that situation.
Yes, that's exactly where I was. And like, so I knew that, because I really wanted human connection. I wanted, normality. I wanted structure. I wanted security. I wanted stability. I wanted nothing more in my life than that. But I knew that if I could get it, but I couldn't keep it, because it was only a matter of time before I robbed, I lied, I stole, I cheated, I hurt. You know, the things that we do in order to get another one.
Yeah.
So it was just such a fucking dichotomy that, yeah, God, it really. So I would make it a point, right? I just got my first ever driver's license at 41, almost 42 years old.
Okay.
I'm 43 now.
Yeah.
So I never had a car or a license, and I'd have cars, but when I'm living in Westchester now, like Bam had told everyone, like, don't give him heroin or any form of downers. Like, they weren't addicts. Well, Bam has his issues now, but at the time, no one understood addiction. So it was okay to do blow and drink, because that's like socially acceptable. But pills and heroin, I like fall asleep in mid-conversation. I steal your wallet. I disappear for days. So it was very well known to no one to give me that stuff. But so I would make it intentionally really hard for me to get heroin. Like, I would not go into Philly and cop, because I was living in Westchester and it was too easy for me to get to Philly. And if I learned the access routes to get it here, then like
you were really done. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd intentionally like only go back to Baltimore. They never let me go back to Baltimore. You know what I mean? So
yeah. What a life, right? It's so exhausting. We create all these boundaries. So yeah.
So that at least prolonged the inevitable of me burning things to the ground, like years, which was fucking a miracle for me. So I made it very difficult in that regards. But again, just knowing that the end was coming, it was God.
It's a yucky feeling. And then we have all that, right? And I can't keep you here all day. I could, but so we get to that airport in Baltimore. Is it in Baltimore? Yeah. So what happens as the miracle starts to transpire? How does the whole thing take off? Or literally, it didn't take off, which ultimately it did. But how does that happen?
Totally. Again, like I started in the beginning of this, the maturity played a big part, and seeds that were planted along the way just sprout. What happened is at 38, I'm now like living back at my mother's house. But my mother had burnt all those bridges in Westchester. Everyone thought it was best that I left there, and I had nowhere else to go. And I'm back in Baltimore, and I'm sleeping at my mother's house. And my mother and brother served me with a restraining order. Now I'm not even allowed in my mother's house. So I go from being nothing to eating out of trash cans, prostituting my body in Baltimore, to then ending up in Bam's house, Viva La Bam, Jackass, kind of a household name, traveling the world, fucking doing amazing things like hanging out at the Playboy Mansion, fucking just doing things that people would dream of doing, maybe. To now being back in Baltimore, literally homeless, walking the streets. And a series of events take place, but ultimately this woman says that she'll buy me a plane ticket if I want to come to Florida. And I have nowhere to go. She lives in a hotel in Florida.
She's a stripper, right?
Yeah,
okay.
She's like a stripper, and it just doesn't look well. But I don't really have. I don't really. It's not. I don't really.
What are our options at this point?
I literally have zero other options. Like not one. I swear to God, I have not one other option. My mother has now kicked me out of her house for real because before, my brother made her serve me with this restraining order. I get served with a restraining order, but then my brother would go back to D.C., so my mother would allow me to sneak into the house and sleep there at night and leave early in the morning. But now my brother's starting to come around because he's getting hip to what my mom's doing, and she's all up in arms with it. And I get it. So I split, and now I'm at the airport, and I don't want to board this flight, but I don't have any other options. And I attempt to board the flight, and the woman at the counter takes a look at me and says, she asks if I'm under the influence of anything, and I said no, and she said, I believe you are, and you will not fly for 72 hours. So that's not like the next flight tomorrow morning. Three days. She wants to give me 3 days to sober up. Which I don't see at the time, right? Yeah. My perspective of this encounter is that like she knows who I am, and her son or daughter's an addict, and she's blaming her kid's disease on me. Yeah. How dare her piss on my parade? The reality is the situation, the current state of mind that I was in at that time, and no one would allow me to do anything in public. So what I learned then, now that I didn't see then, is that the God of my understanding dressed up in the form of a TSA agent that refused me access to that flight. And I was just simply divinely inconvenienced in just such a manner that a big enough gap was created. From the last time I injected a bag of heroin into my arm, to have that moment of clarity, to see what my life really looked like was. And it was like at that moment, it was like a fucking sequence, a timeline of just like a series of events that took place in my life, from the first treatment center to the 12th, because I was about to enter into my 13th. And all these just like, you know, they say before you die, you get like flashcards of things. It was that just appeared like bang, bang, bang. And everything that Lex had told me, everything that these therapists had said, and it just, I had heard it all, but at this moment, I listened to them, I visualized it, I saw it, I internalized it, I processed it, I understood it, and it made sense. And I just got out of line, and I called Lex, and I just said, please, can you help me? I want to kill myself. And he said, no, you're going to get on a train, and you're going to come from BWI Airport back to 30th Street Station. Yeah. And this was Memorial Day, 2015, and him and another dear friend who you may know, John Cosgrove.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
They came and picked me up at that train station, and they let me stay with them that night. And they sent me to see my parole officer in the morning, and my parole officer granted me one more chance and sent me to
a Catholic Charities rehab, right?
Yeah.
And what starts to happen?
I just, you know, what starts to happen is that for the first time I walked into a facility without a plan. I had no plan. That my lack of options turned into the best of plans, because it allowed me to just give you me, right? Like I was so tired of thinking, doing, and deciding for myself that like the willingness was a direct result of a higher power's action. Because if pardon my French, but if you would have told me to get naked, stand on my head in the corner and jerk off for 5 months straight, I'd say from when to when. You know what I mean? Like I would literally, and because of that willingness that was not by my doing, my sobriety has been A, mundane, which thank God, and B, fairly a simple process to this point, because I was so beaten, I was demoralized, as they say. I was beaten in that state of reasonableness that I was a sponge, and I soaked up all the suggestions they gave me, and I listened to every word they fucking said, because at this point I knew that my life depended on it. And it's not that cliche. It's how I was, your life depends on this. To drink is to die. Like, I didn't give a fuck about dying. Like, that was actually welcomed to me. Then the fight was over. My family could finally sleep peacefully. Like, that was cool. What scared me into sobriety is to have that drink, to have that drunk, have that drug, to not die, and have to continue to wake up every day and do things against my will to get enough money to buy more heroin. That's what scares me into sobriety and keeps me in sobriety. And I still today, with over 7 years sober, do the same things they told me in the beginning with 7 days sober. Right. I live my life by that today. I really do.
I'm going to keep you for a little bit longer, but I'll let you get out of here in like 5-10 minutes, if that's cool. So when you end up going to this treatment center and you stick with the long-term recovery model, how much did that help you? It was instrumental, man. It was, I had the state Medicaid insurance. I had the Chester County insurance, and if you're a product of my environment, state insurance, that is, and you're familiar with Chester County, that's like the Cadillac of state insurances. You get an automatic 90 days, no questions asked. Wow.
So they throw me to 90. I settle in, totally accept the outcome. Fully embrace this deal. I'm in it to win it. I know things are different. I know that I was the boy that cried wolf so many fucking times, and I believed it every time I cried wolf. Not every time, but the majority of the times when I said I was finished, I really believed I was finished. Unfortunately, I always underestimated the opponent that I was up against. Hence me getting beat the fuck out of every time I stepped in the ring.
Yeah.
This time, like, I could understand the severity and the complexity of my situation. It was no longer deniable to me nor anyone else in the world. And so for the first time in my life, I stopped fucking talking, and I just walked, and I let my walk do my talk. And what that looks like is no more calls to my mother or letters to loved ones saying I've changed, things are different, I'm gonna fucking be the best version of me, blah blah blah. It was no phone calls. It was no letters. It was me showing up to group on time, actively participating, following the suggestions, remaining open-minded, finding a God of my understanding, making my bed, helping others in the community, doing my chore. And what I know now that I did not know then is that I was finally starting to work on the real problem. The drugs and alcohol are not the fucking problem. They're the solution. The problems that I started to address were my behaviors, my thinking, my attitude, my behavior. So by doing all of those things, I started to change. And I didn't have to tell people I was changing because they could watch my walk. And my walk did my talk. And so then, very, very slowly, and when I mean slowly, like after a year, family members started to reach out a little bit, old friends started to appear, but they were still very cautious.
But that's what it takes.
So.
Like, it takes like the willingness. And this is all, I don't know shit, but this is my experience, right? Like the willingness. I remember I went to that place, Karen, in Pennsylvania, and I got done there, and they were like, "You got to go somewhere else, dude." And I was like, "Fuck." all right. You know, and that was never, you know how those treatment centers are. You lobby for like, you know, the last 15 days of your 30 days about how you're not going to go to an extended care place because you're still out of your mind. And then they tell you that you're going to go. And I said yes. And I was so out of it. I mean, I can remember showing up at the extended care place, and it was actually in Bel Air. It was called MRP at the time. I think they're gone, Maryland Recovery Partners. But I show up there, and I'm still out of it. Everybody I'm seeing, I'm thinking has been in my life before. And I'm not necessarily being negative. I'm just like, oh, I remember that guy. Like, you know. And I just thawed out there, dude, for like another 5 months and showed up. I worked at a KFC. You know, I went to every meeting they told me to go to, pretty much. I left once. I remember I left the meeting once. We would get $50 a week if we had a job, right? That was good. They put it in our escrow account and they give us 50 cash. And I remember this guy, David, was a counselor, and he showed up at a meeting as I was leaving, you know? And so I didn't hit my quota for the week, and I went to get my money for the week, and the guy gives me 25 instead of 50, and I'm like, yo, what the fuck, you know? I got $50, and he goes, no, we caught you leaving a meeting early. And I remember thinking like, God damn it, they got me. And as I was leaving, Novak, he goes, hey man, because he gave me the 25 now. I have this for 7 days. And he's like, hey, you don't smoke, do you? I'm like, no. He's like, you can make it last. I'm like, God damn, you know? But that is the world that I grew up into a man in. You know, I mean, I learned how to work a cash register at KFC, which was like the hardest thing I'd ever learned to do. And my whole life started to change. And that's what you guys have now. You have Novak's house.
Well, that's funny. Your story is really a spitting image of mine, right? Like I went to not Karen, a different place. I stayed there for 90 days. And then from there, the extended living, I went to a sober house where I lived for a year. And my get well job was washing dishes at a diner called Mary Ann's in Levittown, Pennsylvania, for $6 an hour under the table next to a 14-year-old kid named Brian. Yeah. You know, and that $6 an hour under the table. Now, in my mind, I believe that I should have been the fucking president of the United States at that time, at the very least. So, you know, I had always heard people talk about humility, and it sounded great, but it never made sense until it made sense. And that job allowed it to make sense for the first time. And washing those dishes next to that 14-year-old kid, it really became one of the biggest foundations of not only my sobriety, but my life.
Yeah. And dude, I took great pride in it. And I remember this kid similar to you, this kid Lance showed up like 30 minutes late, you know, and he's a fucking high school kid. Of course he was late. He's God bless him for showing up to work. But I remember thinking like, you know, how dare you? Like you're 30, like come on, man. And that's where I was, and it worked out for me. So, you know, you go forward and you've got, what are some of the other things, some of the highlights? Because I gotta let you go here in a couple minutes, but you have so much good stuff to say. You know, some of the things that you share in your message today.
I mean, today, just where I'm at is just, you know, I try to deliver my, you know, knowing what I know today, that I didn't know then, is that the demographic that we deal with, because now I'm completely submerged in the drug and alcohol culture, like just as much as I was before. Like I write books that pertain to my life, which is, you know, largely in part of alcoholism addiction. I have a documentary coming out about my life. I'm an interventionist. I'm a motivational speaker. I work in the drug and alcohol treatment field, helping people get into treatment. I'm a sober guy. I sponsor guys. So my life is literally consumed by drugs and alcohol. The only difference is I don't use them today, and I get paid from them. It's very strange. And then I own these men's sober living houses, and the demographic that I deal with is largely defiant by nature. They hate authority and they refuse to conform because they possess a job that consists of knowing everything, such as I did.
Yeah.
So knowing what I'm up against, I try to deliver my message throughout my social media platforms and just the way that I conduct myself on a daily basis in a form of attraction rather than promotion, right? And if I can get the people that I'm largely surrounded by, which are sick and suffering alcoholics and addicts for the most part, to want what I have so bad, to find it so desirable, so attractive, so appealing, so much so that they almost like want to fuck it, right? Like if I can get them to want what I have so bad that they're willing to do what I've done to get what I have, then the terms of their contract will forever change. But it has to be their idea. So I simply just live this really rad life that allows me to do some of the most amazing things that I've ever done in my life. And it all transpired from the worst day of my life. It literally all came from that day that I thought could never have gotten worse, which was standing in the basement of that Catholic Charities rehab at 38 years old, as this 18-year-old tech thumbs through these donation boxes looking for some used underwear, and I was praying to God that he found them. You know, but I couldn't see the blessing that was taking place at the time. I was incapable, because I was just so diluted by drugs, alcohol, and just delusion. So today, what I really want people to understand is that the disease of addiction is not a fucking death sentence, right? And as long as you're breathing, it's never too late. I'm a guy with over 7 years sober, and I was the guy that really believed that I'd be buried in that plot that my mother brought me years back. So I just want people to understand that it's crazy to think, but the only time that I had the ability to win this fight was when I admitted defeat. And it's okay to admit defeat. I know it goes against like everything that we do and say and how we live. Because to be on the street, to fight is to survive. To fight is to win. To fight is to get another bag.
Yeah.
But then you come into sobriety. To fight is to lose. To fight is to die. Right? So I had to admit defeat before I had a chance at victory. And that's what I want people to understand, is that like that's where it all begins.
So you still, and by the way, you're back. You're skating again today.
Yeah, totally. At 43, I'm about to release this part that I filmed over the last year, and it's literally the best part that I've ever put together that can stand on its own when it comes out.
And the houses are it's Novak's houses, and they're all over Westchester, right?
Yeah, well, Wilmington, Delaware.
Okay.
So I opened up the first Novak's house about a year and a half ago with 10 beds, and today I have 4 houses with 40 beds. And I have an abundance of scholarships available for any man who's searching for a more structured environment to continue their sobriety in upon completion of whether it's a detox or residential or any level of care treatment center. My mission that I find myself on today is to refusing price to be a deterrent for anyone seeking a better way of life. So I have these beds I have these sober houses with these beds with scholarships. So I literally have an amazing program that's free if you're willing to do what it takes to stay sober. And
we'll put all those contacts out there along with the phone number that you're just fucking giving out. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And sometimes you will answer that phone if it doesn't go. And if you can't get it, it goes to other folks who can help these young men out, or just men in general. Last thing for you. What do you do? I mean, because you do have this aura. What do you do to maintain that? How do you keep it going? How do you keep that light burning? Because you've got yourself in a position now where you are appealing. How do you keep that happening?
Well, the first thing is, and I always talk about it, is I keep my past married to my present. Because the moment that I forget the pain that brought me through the doors of treatment center number 13, it's not a matter of if I'll return, but when I'll return.
So you keep your past married to your present.
Yeah, because and then what that allows me to do, it allows me to remain grateful for any fucking opportunity given to me, good, bad, or indifferent. Because if you came from where I've come from, the pain of this everyday life that we get is pretty minuscule compared to, for me.
Yeah.
So
me too.
So what I try to do, and this is a work in progress, and more so lately because I've had a few instances where I've wanted to revert back to some old behaviors and really beliefs, is I'm really praying for gratitude and forgiveness towards everyone and everything. And if I can find myself in line with those two words, literally 24/7, I will have the most freeing life that anyone could ever think of. So that's, I can add the gratitude's the easy one for me, but forgiveness, that's, especially in business.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. So I'm literally trying to live my life by those two words today.
And we're growing, dude. Like the more success you have, the more you're developing like that business acumen by making yourself vulnerable to learning. And that's life. Like we still have so much to learn, right? And it's okay. I heard a guy say on a meeting just this weekend, it's okay. And this guy's like 20, 30 years sober. And, as far as I'm concerned, he's got it going on, right? In sobriety and in life. But he says it's okay. It's okay to know that you've got a lot more to work on. That's fine. You don't live under this dark cloud that you're not baked or you're not done yet, Right.
Yeah. Hey, and that's the cool thing too, that the longer that I stay sober, the less that I know. You know what I mean? Like it's the longer I'm around and the more in tune and aligned with myself and my spirituality, the reality is the less that I know about a lot.
Gratitude and forgiveness. Brandon Novak, dude, thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much for what you're doing, putting the word out there, making this deal attractive.
If it's okay with you, man, I'd like to leave 2 phone numbers, one of which, if anyone needs help getting into treatment, they can call me directly. It's 610-600-9174. And if any men out there are in need of sober living and are willing to relocate to Wilmington, Delaware, and we have beds available, call us directly, 302-433-6256.
And what's the other number again, the 610?
610-600-9174. And if you can just put like my website down, and that kind of takes you everywhere, which is BrandonNovak.com.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the documentary, and the book is Streets of Baltimore. We'll put all that stuff down there, man. It's all really incredible stuff. The cool thing is, for somebody like you, man, you carry an incredible message, and you're a fascinating dude. So these are the kind of stories we like to get out there, so people know that. I mean, Superman rides the bus, dude. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I get it, man. Hey, thank you. I enjoyed talking to you. This is fun.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.
Are you a podcaster? Let's talk podcast hosting. Are you tired of your current podcast host? Need real support in a community that gets it? At Rogue Media Network, we offer top-tier podcast hosting services to help you thrive. From hosting and distribution to dedicated support, we've got you covered. Starting as low as $25 a month. Join our community of passionate podcasters today. Contact us at hello@roguemedianetwork.com.